this video might look technical, but I promise you, it's not too bad. As long as you're not a complete newbie to Affinity Designer, you'll be okay. I'll be gentle with you. But before we get into how I drew the wheel on this Abarth, I've got to say thanks to Schmalti1 who helped me out with a little problem I had in a previous video. I just mentioned I couldn't deselect something on Affinity, and it would just... I clicked off it, but it remained highlighted, and it was really, really frustrating. But I got a comment. I asked the question, I got a comment back, it sorted the problem out, so that is fantastic. It's great when, you know, I try and put as much into these videos as I can, but it's nice when it's a two-way street as well. And if you get stuck with anything on this video, just don't be afraid to drop me a comment. I always try and help people out where I can. And if you're pushed for time and you want to just get straight into it, I will leave timestamps in the description so you can jump to the bits that are important to you. And just before we get started, if you're new here, my name's Dan and I do vector illustrations on Affinity Designer and Inkscape. Also do vinyl stickers and vinyl art as well. But this video is all about the Abarth. So you join me at about the 3/4 mark on this piece. I've still got loads of detail to put in on the front end and the glass reflections. But for today, we're going to be looking at the wheels. I've already gone ahead and done the rear wheel. And what I want to do is show you how I got to that stage on the front wheel and maybe add a little bit more detail because it's a bit bigger and a bit nearer the camera. You haven't missed much. All I've done so far is use the pen tool to make selection around the tyre. If I just tap on that, you'll see I've kept it neat where the tyre is, and then I've just cut in behind the bumper because the bumper covers up the edge. Don't waste time trying to follow the bumper edge. It'll just cover, so don't worry too much about the bits you don't see. I've done the same on these sections, and for the wheel and the badge I've used the ellipse tool. Now if you're not used to Affinity, if you're quite new to it, I will leave a link to my Affinity Designer for the iPad quick start guide. It's a playlist with a ton of useful easy tips to get you going. I'll leave that in the description. Now one tool we're going to use loads in this is the colour picker, which is on the colour palette. And once you've made a selection with the pen tool or with the shape, you're going to pick up the colour dropper and you're going to drag it all the way across into the section that you're working on. And when you release, that's going to change the colour next to the dropper to the colour you selected. Now, when you start this, obviously you can look across that wheel. There's loads of different greys, loads of different blacks. There's all sorts of shades. As long as you can work with the colours, don't worry if they're correct or not. As you get towards the end of the drawing, it'll all start to make sense and you'll know which ones to change. And changing them is pretty easy. So let me just show you how to do that. We turn on the wheels. And let's pick up the node tool, already got it. Let's just tap on one of these. So say if we wanted to change all of these to the same colour, we can go into the layers. And you can see, because I try to work methodically, I did all these at the same time, so they're all stacked together neatly. So I can tap on the top one, come down to the bottom one where the colour changes. I'm going to use 2 fingers and select those. And that'll pick up all of them. That's on both wheels. And that's just because they're in the same group. If you can group them how you want. I should have done a back wheel and a front wheel, but it doesn't really matter. So now to change all those, I'm just going to the colour palette. I can just tap and we can change them to any shade we want. It's really easy. So don't get too hung up on the colour choices in the beginning. We can sort it out later. We're now ready to make our first selection, and I'm looking for the most obvious block of colour. So we'll just turn the wheels back on. So I've covered the main holes, and now I think the next obvious one is this grey. So that grey shows up here, here, in this section. It's all over. So I reckon we start here and go from there. So I'm going to grab the pen tool, make sure we've got on the group that we want to be on, that one. And I'm just going to start on looking for a point to start on, like there. And I'm just going to, I say this in every video, I'm just going to make straight selections. Don't get bogged down with trying to make curves as you go, because you'll struggle. There's a much easier way. So I'm going to come back up to this flat section. I want to come across, because there's like two different radiuses there. There's a tight one there, there's a long bend there. I think I'm going to, where this flat section is, drop a node there, come across this corner to this flat section, but you can see the grey kind of leaks down into this spoke. So I want to stay on this side of it. And come down to a point, and then come back up on the other side. So when you come back on these curves, you want to be on the opposite side of the curve. Don't put your node over here, or else you'll struggle trying to match the two. You want the two to have a nice flow to them as they come back up. And then we come to the top. So that's our first selection. So it looks a mess. So we're going to go into the node tool, and we're going to start finessing this a little bit. So we started there. Let's just bring this down a little. Put a little bend into it, make it a bit more dynamic. And the same there. And then we can push that into that. That follows that nicely. And this is going to be the tricky one because it's quite tight. I'm going to push that into there. Tap on the node next to it. I'm going to bring up the handles, and then we can kind of make it a tighter fit. That looks pretty good. Carry on down into this. So that's going to cross over onto the other side, but that's okay because I can pick that up and push that one out of the way. And then the same there. Now what you're going to find is where you've bent two lines together, they're going to be maybe disjointed. When you put a colour fill into it, you'll find that they're not perfect. So what I do, if you tap on the node, grab one of the handles and move it until this becomes pink. You probably can't see because my hand's in the way. Let's do it from this side. If you move one of the nodes until that handle becomes pink, and then release it, that connects these two. So now, instead of having them independently move, when I move one, it moves both sides. I do that all the way around the shape. Then I know it's going to be a smooth sweep. Now there's a little kink here, so I'm going to add a node, and probably one there. I'm just going to bend that into that little kink. I think that's okay. Then we're going to use the colour picker. Drop a grey, then tap on that to fill the colour. And then just have a quick look, see what it looks like. Let's turn on, actually let's just put this is the wheels group, and it's drawn the curve above it. So what I'm going to do is long hold on that, and then just drag it onto the wheels and let go. And then I'm going to turn the wheels back on. And that's our first selection. Now carried on making selections, and I've chosen a couple of other colours just to flesh it out a bit. I'm going to turn the layer back on. It's going to look like a big step from the previous time you saw it, but here we go. So that's just flat colours, making selections, and all I've done is do a little bit, and then I go to the complete wheels layer, and then I just flick it on and flick it off. And then I'll look at what's missing, what stands out, what's wrong, and add it in. And if we just come out, it's already looking quite well balanced against the other wheel. That then takes care of most of the block work for that wheel. I will come back in and do some finer details and smaller selections just to make it pop that bit more. But you've seen the technique and you've seen how to implement it, so I don't want to keep going over old ground. So we're going to move on to the gradient fade that I've put on the top of the tyre. I'm going to repeat that down the bottom like bounce light off the ground. So just to save a bit of time, you've seen me use the pen tool like 1,000 times. So I've already made the selection. I've used the colour picker to select the grey that I used on the rear tyre. So I'm just going to tap on that to fill that layer. And now we're going to use transparency to give us that fade. So you'll find it over defaulted on the gradient tool. So just tap on the gradient tool. Underneath that is transparency. And much like the gradient tool, it will just fade from whatever colour you've got selected into nothing. So I'm just going to pull up on that. And what I'm trying to do is get it to sort of fade out just as it gets to the edge of that shape. So you can just see the edge of the shape, but it's not very pronounced. Just bring it down a bit. That's looking pretty good. So we can just tap off that. Of course, if you want to edit that gradient, that transparency, all you got to do is tap on the shape, and then you'll lose your transparency slider. But with that layer selected, just go back over to the gradient, pick up transparency again, and you can edit it. So the Abarth isn't quite finished, but here's what it looks like so far. I've added in some more details on the wheels and in a few other places. One major area I'm going to have to do a dedicated video for are the badges, because there's just not enough detail in that photo to do it from this photo, so I'm going to have to substitute something in there. And if you've watched this far, thank you very much. If you've got any use out of it at all, please give me a like, and maybe even consider subscribing to the channel. My name's Dan, and this is Petrol Vectors.